Hola, hola, amiga. Welcome to today's episode where I am so excited that we are finally touching on the topic about financial literacy. I have been wanting to do an episode about this because it is so important to talk about dinero with our loved ones, especially our kids. Our guest today is the remarkably accomplished Jasmine Lopez, a wife, mother of three, and creative entrepreneur with over 2 decades of professional experience. Jasmine Lopez is a Latina creative, owner of Mentally Mutual, and co founder, executive director of a creative arts nonprofit called the Firehouse Dream. Jasmine authentically shares her story with how she went from bankruptcy to living intentionally and purposefully. She believes when we have a healthy relationship with self, the world, and money, we can have a thriving life that is built out of what brings us joy and meaning. In this episode, we explore Jasmine's perspective on financial trauma, healing, and importantly, raising financially aware kids. She shares great tips about why it's important to share financially aware kids and how to talk to them about money as well. We will also hear Jasmine's personal money journey from experiencing significant loss to redefining success and discovering abundant living. So, tune in as we unravel key insights on financial literacy, mindset, and generational wealth, because it is so important that we create positive conversations and that way we can become positive role models to our kids. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are setting up for success so that way we can better our future generations and not repeat the cycle of financial trauma, scarcity mindset, as well as having an unhealthy relationship with money. So there was so much that we unpacked in this conversation, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. So no te lo pierdas as you listen to Jasmine Lopez's story and how we can raise financially aware kids. Welcome to the Viva la Mami podcast. I am your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of two on a mission to help redefine the meaning of motherhood as a modern Latina mom. Motherhood can be a complex journey, interwoven in two identities that often make us feel ni de aquí ni de allá. Viva la Mami is committed to providing you with knowledge, tools, and support to navigate the challenges and triumphs of motherhood as Latina moms. On the show, we'll be discussing culturally relevant topics that will help inform and empower you in whichever season you are in on your motherhood journey. We'll be joined by Latina moms, experts and professionals who can offer advice, practical tips, relatable stories, and honest conversations. So bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space as we create comunidad about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. Hola, hola, Jasmine. How are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I am good. Thank you for being here. I love the kind of conversation that we're going to have today because it is so crucial as it relates to raising kids to be financially aware. And that way we can kind of dismantle the financial trauma that some of us grew up with, and also for them to have this positive mindset where oftentimes we didn't really know about. So much that we're going to cover here, but I would love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners. So, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you currently do?
I am Jasmine Lopez. I'm a wife to my husband, married him 17 years ago. We have three beautiful children, ages 15, 11, and 8. And on the entrepreneurship side, I've done it all. I'm a creative entrepreneur, I'm a professional photographer, gosh, for 20 years now. And I really have walked through this journey of how do I build a business that's authentic to who I am and that is connected to the wholeness of who I am, including being a Latina, right? And so it inspired me to start a nonprofit called the Firehouse Dream in Maywood, Illinois. And we exist to be a safe space for BIPOC youth between the ages of 15 and 22 so that they can thrive in every area of their lives. And we do that through creative entrepreneurship, financial wellness and mental well-being. And then recently just launched my own personal finance business called Mentally Mutual. Just reimagining business. Now that I've been on the for-profit side, the nonprofit side, both sides have their own set of challenges. And so Mentally Mutual is this new way of me trying to identify how to do business in a way that centers people and community over profit, that really is leaning more into like the restorative economy, and that really centers collective flourishing and not just our own pockets.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. And how did that really inspire you to create that? I know that you mentioned through your experience as a business owner, both the for profit and non for profit side, but what kind of need did you see and gaps did you witness that ultimately led you to this new venture?
Yeah, so well, I lost my home, my car, and my possessions in 2010 in my mid 20s as a young mom and a new wife. And it was through that process where I really believe it was an opportunity to reimagine and redefine what success looked like. And so ever since then, I've been on this journey of rebuilding, really identifying what does success and thriving look like that doesn't tie my worth and or my value to money or how much I have and don't have, but rather live an abundant life that's connected to the things that bring us joy and that's connected to the things that reflect our values. I didn't realize that other people were interested in personal finance and my unique way of approaching our finances and how we budget, values based budgeting, and really thinking about a collective wealth building, not just individual wealth building. And so I've really taken the time now to intentionally develop and grow this new venture with Mentally Mutual that centers community. That's really about how do we build generational wealth without it having adverse effects towards impacting our communities, because oftentimes a lot of these strategies deeply impacts our communities. And I live in a community that has experienced this investment, so I live it, I see it every day, right? I see how these strategies of buying and holding properties until gentrification happens causes communities like mine to not experience revitalization. And so as I'm identifying what do I want wealth building to look like? How can I do that in a way that honors my community, my neighbors, while me leaving a legacy behind for my children as well?
Oh my gosh, all of this is so beautiful. And it definitely gives perspective, especially as someone who recently, my husband and I purchased an investment property in an area that is slightly being gentrified. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't we be intentional of the individuals that want to stay in the community that they've been for so long instead of, trying to target another population that they can benefit. And yeah, so it definitely gives perspective about, okay, now that we are in this position of power, because it is when you really think about it as business owners, as investors, okay, how can we be intentional to give back in some way? And so I love the platform that you have created, and I see it growing and I love it. And so you did mention that in 2010 you lost a lot of your assets. And so can you tell us a little bit more about your money story and how was your upbringing about money? And what really inspired you to be a content creator centered on financial literacy?
Yeah, good question. So, as a little girl, little Jasmine grew up in a single parent Latino home on the southwest side of Chicago. And growing up, we faced financial insecurity. Often, was told we didn't have money for things. Saw the ways that my mom tried to really provide, and did an amazing job at trying to provide that security while really not realizing or seeing the ways that we were living is maybe not how many other of my peers were living. And so the concept of curiosity around finances is something I was always interested in, even as a young kid, but that safety was not fostered in my home environment. And so I have a core memory of asking her a question about money and her just giving me this like Latina death stare, like, don't you dare ask me another question around money. And that to me wrote the story that I can't ask questions about money. And so I've been on that journey ever since a little girl through most of my adulthood, trying to learn on my own things that I feel like I should have known but didn't know, like how to budget, how to save, what does investing look like, all of these things, right? And so I'm just like growing up now, a young family, married, and we're trying to pursue this American dream, air quote, right? And realizing that we did it in a way that was beyond our means. And then the mortgage crisis happens in 2010. And we were one of the millions impacted by that who lost our homes, were displaced. We did not have anywhere to go. And gratefully, my mother in law took us in as we were in transition. We ended up having to borrow some money from a really good friend, which was very vulnerable, right? Because even as like Latinos, we don't talk about our money struggles. We don't invite other people into that. And I'll never forget me going to my husband and saying, I think we need to invite our friends into what we're going through. And I think we need to walk through this deep loss and grief in partnership with community. And he was a little nervous at first about it, but we did it. And I'm so grateful because this group of friends really helped us in this transition of loss and grief, and trying to really rebuild and trying to do it in a way that, I thought that it was I thought a lot of my mindsets were it's because I don't know how to budget. It's because I don't know how to save, right? So the first chunk of the years was all about, okay, I need to budget, I need to save, I need to do all these things. And then about 7 years ago is when I was like, okay, I've mastered budgeting and still I have no savings. What am I doing wrong? There's a disconnect here between our physical finances and not achieving the financial goals we're looking for. And that's when I realized there was an opportunity to really address my mindset. What are the money beliefs? What's the money story that I have? The lies that I'm believing about my relationship with money? And how do I heal that so that I can make informed financial decisions for the now and my future? And so that's when my healing journey started. I got into therapy. I connected with a financial coach and began this journey of reading books, learning everything that I can about money, and kind of just walked myself through, okay, these are the lies I'm believing about myself, about what is potentially possible or not possible for me. I realized I had a lot of limitations over myself. And I'll never forget this one time. I connected with my financial coach and she asked me, why did you move to Maywood? And I said, because it's all we could afford. It's all our budget could get us, right? We're such a low income family that at that time that's all we could afford. And she's like, well, that's limited thinking. And I was like,
Mm.
what? I wasn't offended. It was a bold thing to say, but I feel like something shifted off of me when she said those words. And I got curious again. It was almost that curiosity in me came back and was like, well, what do you mean by that? Tell me more. And she's like, read these books, find some, here are some podcasts, some resources that I think you could get connected with. And I said, okay. And that's when I started. And then I started just Googling more financial books that I could read. And that's what I did. And it got me on this whole process of being like, whoa, she's right. I did have limited thinking. And now I want to tap into unlimited thinking, unlimited dreaming around what could be for my future, for myself, my family, and for my community.
Oh my gosh, so much that you shared that I kind of want to unpack a little bit. And I
Yes,
find it
yes.
I find it so interesting how a lot of folks in the Latinx community are very hesitant to talk about money. And that is just something that you do not talk about at the table. It's almost like politics and religion. For some reason, for our community, it's like, don't even mention how much we make, don't even mention nothing about like our spending habits or anything like that. And for me, I'm like, well, why not? And I think that it always sparks that curiosity that you mentioned, and bravery as well, to be uncomfortable. And it's like, no, I think we all need to talk about the truth, right? About certain habits that can be damaging, not just in your present life, but also in your future? And how can we kind of tackle that to make sure that you live a life that you want, that we shouldn't limit ourselves? And I am speaking out of privilege, I would say, because I am, you know, second generation for the most part in this country, right? I didn't have to go through that struggle of immigrating from one country to the other, of assimilating. And oftentimes maybe money is kind of at the back burner because you're just trying to survive when it comes to like saving or investing or, trying to build a business or what have you. And so I definitely speak from privilege in that way. But now that we're here, right? How can we make a better impact for our children, for the next generation? And so that in itself is such a big topic that's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you, because through what you've learned in your experience and how much you've grown in educating yourself, right? And seeking help, especially in getting a financial coach. I think that is so helpful. But I'm kind of curious, like, did you spend a lot of money in hiring them? Because that oftentimes is a hesitation, right? We have this limited mindset where it's like, well, I'm not going to pay for someone to tell me how to budget. Can you tell us a little bit more about like any tips that you may want to share about that specifically, and any based on your research, right? Like, what kind of books do you recommend or literature that people can start out with if they want to kind of change their mindset?
Yeah, in terms of financial coach, everybody has a different approach to how they coach, what that looks like. For my situation, it's what I call creative provision. I actually didn't pay for her service. I only met with her twice. That's all I needed. She's like I kid you not, her saying I had limited thinking was enough of the scales, I guess, off my brain that I needed, that allowed me to be like, okay, curiosity just flooded in, and I did my own research and studied and read books and resources. So one of the first books that she recommended was Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a great resource. Any book I'm going to label or share are going to have problematic issues in it, right? I always say take nuggets, find nuggets that you resonate with in that book or resource, and apply that part to your life. So I'm going to preface that first because I know he can be somewhat problematic. But there was something in that book, again, that helped shifted my mindset when he says, instead of saying, I can't afford that, ask, how can I afford that? Because when we allow ourselves to ask it in a question, it opens up the opportunity for our brain to get creative to figuring out a solution, right? Now, I'm not advocating for spending beyond our means, but could there be opportunity to experience purchasing XYZ that maybe doesn't necessarily require it coming out of our bank account? And that's what I call creative provision. And so an example of that would be through bartering. Do you have a skill that you can barter in exchange for a financial coach, right? Can you time bank? Going back into like the kind of indigenous ways of how we practice and share shared skills and sharing of resources. That's kind of what I tap into a lot when I'm looking to have access to something like quote unquote financial coaching that maybe isn't in a budget. How can I leverage a skill I have that can allow for me to be able to have access to this opportunity without it coming out of my bank account?
Mm.
So that's a resource. If again, it really depends on like what approach you're looking to do, right? A really great book that I recently read was called Decolonizing Wealth. So if you're really looking to get into like the philanthropy side of things or investments and how you can approach decolonizing our mindsets around wealth, I highly recommend that book. And those are the few that I've listened to. I've listened to different podcasts. I listen and follow to a lot of financial coaches, content creators who do finances. My approach isn't technically around like how to get rich. That's not what my content is. So really finding content creators who have a shared alignment towards like what my intentionality and goals are and what it looks like to build wealth through this reframed viewpoint has been really neat and fun to do personally. But yeah, that's what I would say. I've listened to podcasts, find content creators, and then there are tons of books out there. Like another one that I read by Rachel Rogers is "Everyone Should Be a Millionaire." Again, take nuggets from what you resonate with, and then apply that to your own life.
Mm, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's a really good way to start out, and I think it sparks curiosity at first, and knowing that these books exist for a reason, right? And yeah, I totally agree with, like, I think it's Rich Dad Poor Dad. Like, I don't like the way it's written. I'm like, oh, second grader probably wrote it. But this is me being critical on on the literacy standpoint. But my husband is obsessed with that book, and I'm like, you know what, you can just summarize it for me, and that's how we agreed. But I also have read Susie Orman's, and I'm like, okay, this can be a little controversial at times, because again, she's speaking out of privilege, but there were really good tips, and it was very targeted on women and finance. So yeah, and I love how you shared about getting a little bit of this, a little bit of that, because I think at the end of the day, it just depends on what your goals are, and what you want to do out of the education that you gain from all of this information. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. Yeah.
For sure. And a lot of these books are available for free and like through
Mm.
library rental. So you don't even have to go and spend money. There are so many free resources. YouTube is amazing. It's another space to like learn from. Again, I just take nuggets. If there's like a financial strategy I don't know much about, I just Google it. So like velocity banking, for example, is something new that I recently learned about. I
Mm.
popped it in YouTube, watched 3 different videos on it, and I was like, oh, the light bulb went off. I was like, "Oh, okay, I get the strategy. Could it apply and work for me? Not in this season, but maybe in the future it can." So, that's what I mean by, like, you can find all these free resources and then just taking the nuggets and applying them to what's unique to you. But I think the first key thing that's so important is working through your money mindset and really helping you, ourselves to walk through that journey and begin our healing process around what our thoughts and belief systems are specifically around money.
Yes. Yes. And we'll definitely cover that piece, because that is so essential. But in the aspect of parenting, because this podcast is for mamas, why do you think it's important to raise financially aware kids?